Hi and welcome back. Okay, so in the product research phase, what we did, we created a list of 50 to 100 products. We then used the really basic criteria of, is the price high enough? Is there enough demand? And is the competition low to medium so that I can actually rank for this product? And the products that passed that, we then filtered few with some additional requirements, and we got down to this short list of product ideas. And your list, it might be very, very different to this list. This is just an example, and I'm going to walk you through the next steps in the process in order to get your product onto Amazon, selling and making profit. Okay, so we have this short list of product, and I've decided that I'm going to go with these three because they were the most simple. They had a good price, the demand was high, and the competition was low to medium. So we had the tent tarp. So just a simple sheet, very simple product, great kind of beginner product, and you want to go for something similar when you're starting out. It is something as simple as possible. You know, this is just a sheet with the corners that can be attached down. There's no moving parts. It's very simple to manufacture. The second item, the dry sack here, and then the third item was the equipment mat, which is this style product. So the purpose for this example, we're just going to choose one item, and I'm going to show you the sourcing process. So in the other sourcing videos, we covered some of the theory, the principles, the different places you can source, and I'm just going to run you through the process for one product so you can get a better feel for the communication with the factory, the negotiation practice, etc. So we're going to start with the tarp. And this is the best-selling item. We're going to open a couple more. Where are we? Here we go. Open a couple more. Okay, so the best-selling item, what we're looking for first is we need to be able to tell the factory the specification that we want them to quote for, or at least give them some general guidance on the exact item we want. So this one, the best-selling item, is 8 feet by 10 feet. So let's just start with a price for that. We just want to check a couple of competitors to see the prices that they're selling as well. So this is 6 by 8 feet for $16.88, 14 by 6 feet for $15. This one is 8 by 10 feet, similar size, the smallest size that the competitor sells for $15. This one is, let's see, where is it? 10 by 12 feet. Okay, so 8 by 10 seems to be the smallest that people are doing. So we may need to later add an additional larger size option, but we don't want to make the biggest one because the price is going to be higher than the competitors. So when someone's searching for tarp, if we have a 20 foot by 50 foot tarp and our price is $30, we're going to look expensive because they're not going to necessarily know the size. So if someone else is selling 8 by 10 or 10 by 12, they can have a lower price because they're using a smaller tarp size. So the standard seems to be 8 by 10, 8 by 10, around that size. So let's get a price for that first. We can always ask for a price for a larger one later. So that's our first part of the specification, is the size of the product. And then the material, looking here, all they've said is it's a waterproof and a ripstop fabric, polyethylene lamination on both sides. Okay, so let's copy this across. The edges have been padded to make them stronger. We can see that in the image as well. Reinforced corners and for lasting strength. So we want to add that into our specification as well. So what I'll provide for you with this video is a sample of a letter that you need to send to suppliers. And it's going to change depending on your product and your background, but I've just put in here as an example, we are blah blah limited, importer of hiking outdoor products. So you want to use the general niche that you're sourcing for. So if you're sourcing 3 completely different items, then for each set of factories that you contact, just adjust this slightly to make it more relevant to them. Our head office is in the USA, opened 2016, and I would recommend that you put a year or two back of the real date. Yes, I know it's a white lie, but it's going to give you more credibility if you didn't open your company yesterday. So what we want from the factory is for them to confirm their office address, their showroom address and photos, their factory address and photos of their factory, and we want that in English and Chinese. That's just so we can verify what the factory looks like, the location, etc. via email, so we can get a feel for what the factory's like. We want their profile, their size, their revenue, etc. Who their main market, what their main markets are, who their main customers are too. And then here we're putting in, this is what we're looking for. So in this case it's tent tarp, similar to, and what I've done is I've taken this link for this Amazon product, I've put it into bit.ly.com and just got a shorter version of the same link, because otherwise the link is way too long on the page. It's just a short version of the same link, so they can see the kind of product that we're looking for. This is the size we want. Size is 8 feet by 10 feet, waterproof and rip-proof material. And then we've got this additional specification. Let's make it the same. Okay. And then we also want to ask them, in addition, can you reinforce the corners? Okay. So basically, this isn't exact, right? At this stage in the sourcing process, we're just taking the specification from the top 3 or 4 sellers and creating, a guide for the factory of the kind of product we want and the price we want, so we can start to get an initial feel for something similar to what the competitors are selling. We may change this later. It's just an indication at this stage. So we've got the size, we've got the material. If you're doing a different product, you may need to provide a lot more detail on the specification. If you're doing something like an iPhone case, then the size is pretty standard, fits iPhone, material, leather, plastic. What options do you have? You can ask the factory too. So we've got a basic specification. We also want to know what other materials they can do. We want some prices. So what's the minimum order quantity? That's what MOQ means. 5,000 and 10,000. What's the lead time for MOQ, which is how long does it take for them to make the minimum that I can order? So some factories may come back to you and say the minimum is 8,000 units. It's just too high. Some factories may come back to you and say you can order from 200. So we want to know the price, the lead time, the time to manufacture, and what is the quantity for the minimum order. Normally what I ask for is also what's the sample cost and lead time to send to our USA office as well. And then you can add the additional question of how can we add a logo? Please show us photos of logo styles you can do. Please show us your standard packaging. And then I put in the inspection is normally AQL, and this should be level 2, 1.5 major, 2.5 minor. Okay, and the reason I put that in is so the factory know that we're going to inspect this right from day one. So when they're quoting us, there's no surprise that this is the quality standard. This is a very standard quality for goods going from China to Europe and USA for sale. Okay, so we've got some questions for the factory. We've got a basic specification. We've got some quantities. And I mean, these numbers really depends on the item. If it's something big like a sofa, you wouldn't expect to quote much more than say 50 and maybe 300 here instead. If it's a smaller item, imagine you're selling like screws, a bag of screws, you might order 20,000 with your first order because each one costs a cent. So in this case, we're going to do 2,000 and 5,000. I want to know the prices for these. And usually, first order, you want to order as little as possible because it just reduces the risk, reduces the capital investment. Even if you're only breaking even because the price is a little higher, it's better to have a little bit less stock. Okay, so I've got my template ready and I can just copy and paste this in when I'm sourcing. I've been through 3 or 4 different products to get the specification. And the other thing you should do during this process, just to get familiar with the product as well, is to read the negative reviews. So at this stage, before you email out the factory, what you want to do is go through and read all the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star reviews for the top 4 or 5 items, because this is going to tell you what you need to change with the product to improve it. For example, this one, the review rating overall is 4.3 out of 5. So there's definitely room for improvement. So What's the issues? Ripped at the corners. Okay, so we're going to need to make sure when we're sourcing that we're double or triple reinforcing the corners. Let's make this a selling feature when we're launching the product. Cheap flimsy material. Okay, so we want something a little bit thicker, and the difference might be 5 cents between the thin material and the thick material, but customers are going to be so much happier. Bad construction. Okay, thin and not well made material. It ripped apart in 2 places. Cheap, poor quality material. So we can see that if we ask the factory for thicker material, so what materials can do, what thickness, and we reinforce the corners, when it comes to the listing page, later we can highlight these features. So we can show that it's a thicker material, and this was a great example, yoga mat, of how to show that. We can show that it's a thicker material, it's waterproof, it's been reinforced, much like this. So we do this kind of an image on the main listing for the product. We can highlight the changes that we've made and help it to sell better as well. But the main reason for improving the quality is, even if the customer doesn't go down and look at these images, is the fact that when they receive it, there's less returns, because less returns means over time you're going to rank higher as well. So we've chosen our product from our list. We've researched the specifications, we've researched the reviews, we've thought about what we should ask the factory. And this is going to be very, very different from product to product. It's very hard for me to show you every single product, so you're just going to need to do some research. So if your product was going to be table mats, again, what materials can the factory offer, what thickness, read the reviews of the existing selling products, find out what's wrong with it, think about, okay, how can I improve this? And this is an ongoing process. So even though this is what we're starting with, the factory, once you actually get samples in your hand, once you've had some back and forth communication with the factory, what you're going to find is there's additional things you want to tweak and change to the specification. So this step is fact finding. It's just kicking off that process, but it may take 2 to 4 weeks to nail down a final specification, final improvements, and the final price for the product as well. And once we do have that final price, we're going to do an analysis of the profitability of that item to decide if we go ahead or not. We've done a brief analysis on the demand. We've done a brief analysis on the competition. Those 2 things are okay. It's now we need to know the factory price of a good quality product so we can determine if there's enough profit and margin in this item for us to go ahead with. Okay, so we've got our template, and you need to do the work for your particular product to adjust this, to adjust the quantities, to adjust, what questions you ask, to cover off any negative parts of the review. You want to make sure also that you include any of the good features. Why is that? Why is product number 1 number 1, product number 2 number 2, and product number 3 number 3? Try and work out, why are these selling versus the others. So for the top, why is this the most popular versus the others? What are the factors that you can kind of see? And it might not be obvious straight away. You might need to read a few of the descriptions, etc., read the reviews. But if you dig into these products, you'll see what it is that why people are buying certain products over others. It could be that these are too expensive because they're simply too big, or the quality is too low, or there's some features there that are making those products more popular than others. And we want to make sure we include that when we're going through this process as well. Okay, so I have my template letter. It's ready to go. And I'm just going to send out the same thing to every factory. And I've created an account on Alibaba for this example, and I recommend using Alibaba and global sources if you're sourcing from China, and if you're sourcing from the US or you're sourcing from Europe, depending on what your product is, what you need to do is just try to contact as many factories as possible that can make your item in those countries. Why? The more people you contact, the more chance you have of finding the best, cheapest, highest quality supplier for your item. I mean, a lot of people are lazy. They'll just go to Alibaba, they type in the product, they search for it, and they'll email the first 10 or 20 results, and that's it. But there can be, 50 pages of results for suppliers. And even though it's very time, here we got over 100 pages, even though it's very time consuming, I strongly recommend you go through and you email every single supplier available for your type of product. Why? Because that's how I found the gems. That's how I found the cheaper suppliers. That's how I found better products. And the other thing I recommend is, one, you do this process. Two, if you have an agent or you can find an agent, and we'll do a separate video on agents a little later, then you also ask the agent to go through the same process. Then you can compare the results you get with the results the agent gets. You can see their pricing. You can see factory direct pricing. And what we're going to do is I'm going to email out for this product out to every single supplier so that we can go through in this course the replies from those factories, my opinions on those factories, and I'll guide you through, because I've dealt with literally thousands of factories. I used to visit 3 to 5 factories a day, so I've visited thousands of factories. I also used to go to every single trade show out there, so that's 3 or 4 or 5,000 factories in a single location that I could visit as well. So I've dealt with literally tens of thousands of factories. There's a way that I evaluate them very quickly, and I'll show you that process in a separate video. This is just so that we now know what we're supposed to be saying to the factories. So we've got our template, we've put in the specifications, we've put in the review material, and that's what we're going to use to now reach out to all of these. And so basically you can hit contact supplier here. So it's better usually, see there's 772 suppliers for 10 top. And not all of them are going to be relevant. And usually, I honestly don't pay much attention to this information here at the moment. I want to see the factory's reply. I want to see what they come back with before I start to make a decision. So you can contact the supplier just by hitting contact supplier. And all I do is then copy and paste the message to every single one of them. And so it's a time-consuming process. And actually, what I do is I use my virtual assistant who I've worked with for a number of years. Basically, all they do is I tell them the product that I want, I give them the template for the email, and then they go through and manually, one by one, contact everyone. So if you want to find someone to do that, it's a great way to save time later. But the first time, I strongly recommend that you do it just to get familiar with the process. Later, you can outsource to someone else to do this very manual process. So the next step is literally just contacting every single factory that exists out there in China through Alibaba, through global sources, and asking them to quote against this basic specification that we started with. So they got a link to the product, they got the size, materials, they got some additional questions. Most are going to ignore your email, most are not going to answer it fully, but that's okay, because we want the responsive factories, we want the good factories, we want the ones who are experienced in these products to come back to us. We're not too worried about the people who are not serious. So this is the process, and that's it. And now we're going to be sending off the inquiries to all of these factories and then waiting for the reply.